Nothing is free. Okay. So whether you're buying an annuity or you're working with a financial professional, someone is being paid for the work that they're doing. Paying for something isn't necessarily a problem. It's paying for something you don't understand. That's the problem. Welcome to another episode of the Simply Retirement Podcast. I am your host, Eric Blake. Joining me, as always, is Wendy McConnell. Wendy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So my test in this episode is going to be how quickly I see your eyes start to glaze over.
All
So,
right.
as you know, over the past 3 episodes, mixed in, we had a great guest in falling in the middle of that. But over these 3 first episodes that we did on annuities, we talked about what annuities are and kind of the nuts and bolts of what annuities are. And I think that is important. The different types, how they're taxed, all those fun things that I think are fun that you don't think so much.
Well, I don't know if fun's the right word, but okay.
But we're going to shift our focus just a little bit. And instead of learning more about what annuities are, I want to talk about how to decide whether an annuity belongs in your retirement plan. Because if you spent any time researching annuities, and they come up on all different formats, they're on some of the social platforms, and they do come up in different circumstances, and people want to know what is this thing? Should I be thinking about it? And there's some strong opinions, not only just in our industry, but just across the board. A lot of people have opinions about annuities, and a lot of times it's just simply what they've heard rather than actually what they've seen. And what's interesting is some people, even some big firms out there, would tell you that you should never have an annuity. You should never buy one. And then there's other people that seem to think everyone should have one, right? There's this old saying I used to like to use that says when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Then that everybody gets an annuity. When that's all the only tool you got. That's what you give them. And I think that it's a good reminder for retirement planning as well, because sometimes people become convinced that one strategy is always the answer. And other times they become just as convinced that it's never the answer. And I don't think that either approach really leads to the best retirement decisions.
Okay.
Better retirement decisions begin with better questions. And that's a lot of what I want to focus on in this episode and across the board, right? That's what we want to focus on today. And as we go through today's discussion, again, don't worry about remembering all the stuff, all these questions we're going to share with you today, because we put a lot of these in the guide. Does an annuity fit within my financial plan? And I'll remind you where to find that as we wrap up today.
Okay.
All right. So let's start with the first question. Before deciding whether an annuity is a good fit, I want you to ask yourself this one simple question. What retirement problem am I trying to solve? Okay. An annuity is not a retirement plan. It is just one possible tool in our tool chest that may help solve a particular retirement need. So before thinking about the product, think about what your goal is and ask yourself, am I looking for guaranteed lifetime income? Okay. Am I concerned about how market declines could affect my retirement savings? Or maybe have I already contributed as much as I can to my other retirement accounts and I still need tax deferral?
Okay. Yep.
Or maybe you're trying to solve a completely different retirement need altogether. And again, different goals often lead to different solutions. And if an annuity has already been recommended to you, that's what I'd also think about asking the question, what retirement problem is that annuity intended to solve? Okay. Because if the answer isn't clear, if you can't answer that yourself, it's probably too early to decide whether it's the right choice for you or not. Okay. So don't begin with the product, begin with what your retirement goal is, and then ask, does this annuity fit within my retirement plan?
Okay.
So question 2 now gets us to, once you've identified the retirement problem you're trying to solve, the next question is an annuity the best way to solve it?
Okay.
And remember what we were talking about earlier, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The same retirement goal can often be accomplished in more ways than one. Okay. An annuity may be one of those options. It may even be the best option, but it's rarely the only option. Right. So that's all I want to understand. It's important to understand why an annuity is being considered. So ask yourself, why might an annuity be a better fit than something else, than another strategy? Okay. Or what other options could help me accomplish this goal? So if you're discussing a recommendation that's come from a financial advisor, maybe an insurance professional, here's one of my favorite questions to ask. If you weren't recommending an annuity, what would be your second choice?
Okay.
That way you can get an idea, you can get a feel for whether maybe it's the only thing they can offer you. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but then maybe allows you to ask more questions, right?
Now, let me just ask. I think that maybe the annuity gives you a little more stability than other options. It's more of like you can count on that many more than you can count on stocks, bonds.
It depends on the type.
Okay.
So again, when we talked about the types of annuities, for example, if you just said, well, I want a variable annuity, in that variable annuity, you might be as aggressive as you can be with a stock portfolio, but the advantage might be the tax deferral.
Gotcha. Okay.
So again, it always comes back to what problem am I trying to solve?
There's just too many choices.
You ask the right questions, you get the right answers, right?
All right. Here we go.
But if you're discussing again, making sure you're there, if somebody's recommended an annuity to you, which is often the case, and there's it's kind of the thing. And I'm trying to remember if I talked about this in the last episode or not, but when you with annuities, oftentimes they're sold rather than bought, right? Because you've been sold on something that an annuity can do, but not necessarily having all the answers as to how it does it. Okay. So whether it's saying, well, it's going to give me guaranteed income, but I really didn't realize I couldn't touch the money, I couldn't get the income until 10 years from now, things like that. Whereas you buy the feature without really figuring out and understanding all the other variables that might come along with that annuity contract, right?
Okay.
So if someone can explain why they chose an annuity over other options, you'll have a much better understanding of whether it fits your situation, right? So understanding why a recommendation was made is often just important as understanding what was recommended, right? So let's move to our next question, and that is, what am I giving up in return, right? And you kind of touched on this with your question earlier about, well, does it give you more stability? It might, but there's also going to be some trade-offs, right? And every financial decision will involve trade-offs in some way. Okay. There isn't a retirement strategy out there that is just all upside, right? So for example, if I invest more aggressively, I may have greater opportunity for growth, but I'm also accepting more market risk. And annuities work the same way, right? So depending on the type of annuity, I might be giving up some flexibility or access to my money in exchange for benefits that are important to me. Okay. So one example is something called a surrender charge. And a surrender charge isn't a tax, it's part of an annuity contract. So in general, annuities are designed to be long-term financial tools. Okay. So one way insurance companies encourage people to keep the money invested for the long term is by charging a surrender fee if too much money is withdrawn during those early years of the contract. Okay. So depending on the annuity, that might be, say, 3 years, it might be 7 years, it might even be longer. Again, doesn't make the annuity good or bad, but it simply means, I need to ask, does this fit into my plan? So I purchased it for guaranteed income, but I need guaranteed income a year from now. I might not want to buy an annuity that has a 7-year surrender charge. Right. So again, does it fit into my financial plan? Does it fit into my income plan?
Because they are not all the same.
They are not all the same. Not at all. Again, and we're going to go, that's one of the reasons why I think this episode is going to be more valuable than the others. Open up the hood, look inside, look at the kind of how annuities work. But now this is going to be the most important part, is asking the right questions if you are considering or if an annuity has been recommended to you. Right. So I think I might need the money in the next few years. That obviously is an important consideration. If it's money I'm setting aside for income later in retirement, that might be less of an issue. Again, but every retirement involves some trade-offs. The key is understanding them before deciding whether an annuity fits into your plan. Okay. And the next question we want to build on that is, what is actually guaranteed? Because most annuities have something that is guaranteed, right? What is actually guaranteed is important to understand. Because almost always going to be a word you're going to hear when discussing annuities, or again, if an annuity is recommended, you're going to hear that word guaranteed somewhere along the way. So that next question is very simple. What is actually guaranteed? Because you said it just a second ago, not every annuity offers the same guarantees, right? So if you're considering an annuity for guaranteed lifetime income, ask yourself exactly what income is guaranteed. If you're considering an annuity because you want to protect part of your retirement savings, you would ask exactly what is protected.
Okay.
And that's where it can get a little bit tricky, because again, am I protecting my principal, or am I protecting from some amount of market loss? So there's these interesting annuities that are sitting out there that are basically, the easiest way is, it's like a buffer annuity. Okay. So it might say, well, if I buy just a fixed index annuity that protects my principal, We talked about these in episode 2, where if the market goes up 20%, I might get 7. But if it goes down 20%, I wouldn't lose anything because of the market. Might get 0, but I wouldn't lose anything.
Yeah.
Well, there's something called a buffer that says something along those lines, but it may protect me up to 10%. Meaning if the market goes down 20, my principal might still go down, but it might only go down 10% because I got a 10% buffer, right? So there's a level of protection, but it's not principal guaranteed, right?
Yep.
Whether it's the income that's guaranteed or is it my principal that's guaranteed. Again, the goal isn't to understand every single page of that annuity contract. It's to understand the parts that matter most to you, to your retirement. And if something isn't clear, ask where you can find this in the contract.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Then ask the question, are you comfortable with that answer? Because you don't need to necessarily be an annuity expert. That's not what this is about. But you should understand what you're counting on before you have to count on it.
Know exactly what you're getting.
Again, when you bought a product like this, you bought an annuity contract for something, understand how that thing works. Again, whether it's income protection, it's principal protection, it's tax deferral, whatever it is, make sure you understand how it works and how it's going to apply to you. Okay. Next question we want to talk about is, what am I paying for? And the next question is, it's again, one of those things that almost everyone asks. That's always one of those first questions that comes out. What am I paying for if I buy this annuity? So what is it going to cost me? Okay. And it's a very fair question, but I actually think there's a better question to ask. It's, what am I paying for? Hey everyone, it's Eric. Hope you're enjoying today's episode. I want to take just a quick moment to share a resource I think you'll find valuable. Have you ever found yourself asking, how much can I put into an IRA this year? Or how much can I earn before my Social Security gets reduced? Those are the kinds of questions that come up all the time, and the answers change often more than you think. That's why we created a free 2-page tax and retirement planning cheat sheet, updated for 2026, with the key tax, Social Security, and retirement numbers all in one place. You can download it right now at the simplyretirementpodcast.com/retirement cheat sheet. It's a simple reference you can keep handy whenever questions come up. Now, back to the episode. And here's something I think is important to remember. Nothing is free. Okay. So whether you're buying an annuity or you're working with a financial professional, someone is being paid for the work that they're doing.
Sounds like you're about to justify a high cost, Eric.
I'm not justifying anything. It's important to understand. It's important. It's an important question. Is it whether someone is being paid? It's understanding how they're getting paid and what you're paying for,
Okay.
and whether it helps solve the retirement goal that you're trying to accomplish. Okay. Because the cost can vary depending on the annuity and the features that you choose. Okay. So some annuities include optional features that are often called riders. You might have heard that term, an income rider, for example, or a death benefit rider. And that has an additional cost.
Okay.
And depending on how you're working with your financial professional, there may also be commissions paid by the insurance company, or even an advisory fee, depending on how that advisor works. Much like you might pay for a professional investment management, where you might pay advisory fees to own that annuity. But for example, if I might decide guaranteed lifetime income rider is worth the additional cost because it's an important part of my retirement plan, it protects my income during volatile periods, things like that, right? Again, neither decision is automatically right or wrong. But when we talk about those surrender charges, as we talked about just a little bit ago, part of the reason those surrender charges are there as well is because often when that annuity gets purchased, there's a commission paid to the advisor or the agent that sold that contract to you. We know that insurance companies are not in the business of losing money, right?
Oh, yeah.
So not only did they charge potential surrender charges to keep your money in there long term, because that's typically the way the annuities work, but they also want to make sure they don't lose out on those. If they paid a commission to an agent or an advisor, they don't want you immediately taking that money out after they paid a few thousand bucks or whatever it might be to the agent that sold you the contract.
Okay.
That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah. So we talked about those surrender charges. So many of the commission-based annuities, surrender charges are, again, one way the insurance companies recover the upfront commission that they paid when the annuity was purchased. Okay. Again, doesn't make surrender charges good or bad. It simply helps explain why they exist. But if someone describes an annuity as free or no cost, that's probably a good time to ask a few more questions.
There's no such thing as a free lunch or a
Absolutely.
free annuity.
These are some of the questions to think about. How is everyone involved being paid? How's the agent? How's the advisor getting paid? How's the investment firm? Whoever it is you're working with. Are there optional rider fees? So if I'm paid for a guaranteed income and there's a rider fee, what is it? Make sure you know exactly what that is. Are there surrender charges? Again, paying for something isn't necessarily a problem. It's paying for something you don't understand. That's the problem, right? So before making your decision, make sure you understand what you're paying for and why. So, last question I would encourage everyone to ask is what happens if life doesn't go as planned?
And it never does.
And it never does. That's absolutely right. It rarely unfolds exactly the way we expected it to, right? Your plans change, your health changes, families change, priorities change. That's why it's
Goals change.
yes. That's why it's important to understand how an annuity fits into your retirement plan, not just today, but many years from now. So I want you to ask yourself, what happens if I need access to more of my money than I expected?
Okay.
So back to, we'll touch on those surrender charges again, because this is a good example of how these work. In many cases, let's say you've got a 7-year surrender charge schedule. Meaning, so for the first 7 years, it's going to cost you something if you take all your money out. But frequently, you'll have access to some portion. And usually it's about 10%. So I could take 10% of my money out if I needed to and avoid the surrender charges. Back to our tax episode, if it's an IRA, if I take the money out, it still might be taxable, but I wouldn't pay surrender charges for that. Okay. So if I needed more than I could have access to, what would that cost me to do that? So if I took more than 10% out, now I'm charged surrender charges. Again, you just want to be aware of it. Doesn't mean you wouldn't choose to do it, but you want to know. You don't know what's going on.
Doesn't this also mean like why you should have different options, why you should have a couple of balls in the air, so to speak?
Potentially, absolutely. Yeah. So, and again, I think it comes back to if we're, it depends on where we're at in the process, whether we're making trying to make the decision whether we're buying an annuity or if the annuity is already there in place,
True. Okay.
right? And that's where I think asking these questions, asking as many questions as you can in advance and that, fully understanding as best you can before getting into the annuity in the first place is going to help you address some of these issues that might come down in the future.
Okay.
So, what happens if I need access to more of my money than I expected? What happens if my health or my family situation changes? And if annuity has been recommended, another helpful question is, can you walk me through a few of the what if situations?
Good.
And sometimes that's the easiest way to understand how a strategy would work if life doesn't go exactly as you planned it. Right. And one thing I think is really important to know, every state requires what's called a free look period. Now, the length of that time may vary, but this is basically an opportunity to make sure the contract matches what you expected before that decision becomes final.
Oh, how long is that?
It varies by state.
Okay.
So if sometimes it might be 10 days, sometimes it might be 30 days.
I got you.
Again, based on your state, based on and if you're working with an agent or advisor, you want to know for sure, what is my free look period? How much time do I have to look at this contract or to understand this contract more importantly before I could say, no, I don't want to do it. Now, that also speaks to the complexity of annuities in that if there's a free look period, regulators know that these things are complex. They want to give you time to say, nope, I'm done. I don't want this. This doesn't fit my needs anymore. Or I didn't understand this. So you're not stuck. Again, if you're stuck in something that's going to charge you X percentage and penalties to get more money out, that's a problem. And these things, annuities are constantly exposed to litigation because of some of these issues we've talked about. Some of it being just not understanding what I was getting into. Some of it is sales practices that may not be fully up board. There's different reasons why that might be, but again, back to the free look period, it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, I need to review and understand this contract before I sign on that dotted line. Right. So you just want to think of this as an opportunity to make sure your contract matches what you expected before that decision becomes final, right? And take advantage of that time. Review the contract, ask questions, make sure it matches your understanding of how the annuity is supposed to work. Because again, ultimately, it comes down to making an informed retirement decision. It doesn't mean understanding every single page of the contract. It simply means understanding the parts that matter to your retirement and asking questions until you feel comfortable with those answers.
May I vent for a second since we're,
Of course.
why do they have to have these like 15-page contracts that nobody understands it except for a lawyer or you, or it's just, I'm encouraged to just sign stuff without actually understanding it. And there's something wrong with that system.
I'm just gonna let you vent and let it float out there because I don't have a great answer for it. Anytime attorneys get involved, you know what happens, right?
All right.
But I think that's part of it. They're complex vehicles. There's been a lot of litigation around these things again, but whether it's because of how they were sold or just a misunderstanding of what it was supposed to do. But that's why the best thing I can communicate as part of this final episode in this series is asking the right questions. And again, it's reliant on the person responding to those questions to answer appropriately and truthfully, all those good things. But I think even asking certain questions we've talked about in this episode can uncover potential red flags as well. Even if it's as simply said, well, what else would you recommend? If you couldn't recommend this, what else might you recommend? And they say, well, I don't really have anything else. So, well, maybe that means I need to ask more questions again, like we said earlier.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So, as we wrap up this 4-part series, I hope one thing has become clear: annuities aren't inherently good or bad. They're simply one of many financial tools that may help solve certain retirement planning needs. Again, the key is understanding whether they fit within your financial plan. And that's exactly what the guide that we're going to be sharing as part of this episode in this episode series. Does an annuity fit within my financial plan? And whether you're considering an annuity, one has already been recommended, or you're simply trying to be more informed, the guide is designed to help you ask the right questions before making an important retirement decision. And you can find that guide and the other episodes in this series in the show notes or at the simplyretirementpodcast.com.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, so that's it for today's episode. Hopefully, this 4-part series was helpful. Please be sure that you follow the show and be alerted on future episodes. And until next time, please remember retirement is not the end of the road, it's the start of a new journey.
You've listened to Eric on the podcast and heard conversations about retirement income, Social Security, taxes, investing, and many of the financial and non-financial aspects that shape retirement for women. But you may still be wondering what sets Blake Wealth Management apart from other retirement planning firms. The answer is quite simple. At Blake Wealth Management, retirement planning is about more than investments. Eric's passion for helping women comes from the strong women in his own life, including being raised by a single mother and watching his grandmother navigate widowhood at just 62 years old. Those experiences continue to shape the mission behind this podcast and the work we do every day. Whether you are planning retirement with a spouse, navigating retirement on your own, or simply preparing for what may come next, the team at Blake Wealth Management is available to assist you with your retirement planning needs. Visit blakewealthmanagement.com for a free retirement assessment, or call 972-426-7237. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analysis of Blake Wealth Management. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Blake Wealth Management or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Blake Wealth Management and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.